All right. So welcome everyone to our traveling workshop on what non-citizens should know. I'm Jessica Viramontes and I'm a staff attorney with CARECEN. And then Irene, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Irene Carvajal Perez, and I am the legal assistant at CARECEN. I work directly with Jessica Viramontes and service your college campus.
All right. So we know as the holidays are coming up that some of us might be traveling either by car or train, bus, or plane. And so we just thought that this would be a helpful workshop to have some information on how to prepare for our travels. We are recording it so that everyone's aware. And we're we're a small group. So if you have a question, feel free to put it on the chat. And then we'll also, leave some room at the end to answer your questions. So what we're going to talk about today is just, go over CARECEN, who we are, what's our community college project. We're going to go over traveling inside the U.S., what non-citizens should know, the Real ID, which will be changes coming up in a couple of years, or now in about a year and a half. Then we'll talk about traveling outside the US and what you should know and what opportunities folks may have, and then how to make an appointment, and then we'll go over the questions. All right, so I'll pass it over to Irene.
Thank you, Jessica. So here's a little bit more information about who is CARECEN, our mission, our vision statement. Essentially, CARECEN looks to empower Central Americans and all immigrants by defending human rights and civil rights. And in essence, what we're trying to do is that we envision Los Angeles becoming a place where Central Americans and all other communities live in peace and dignity and are able to enjoy the economic well-being and social justice in the city. So this is who CARECEN in essence is. I'll take the next slide. A little bit more about what is the Community College Project. So the Community College Project serves students, faculty, and staff members at your college campus. Our services are performed remotely at the moment due to COVID. The Community College provides a variety of immigration legal services. Now, we do not provide services to international students, visas, or employment-based visas. But we do host on Mondays, are days where we tend to service SMC. And we'll talk later a little bit more about how you can book an appointment. The next slide. So the services that we provide to the community based on our DACA, both renewals and initial requests. So something important to know is that we have fee waivers available. In addition, we also provide advanced parole. We assist with the application. Hi, computing. Thank you so much. So as I was mentioning, some of the services that we provide is in regards to advanced parole, and these are fee waivers available. Advanced parole, we have fee waivers available. Sorry, I keep repeating myself. We also provide family-based petitions, and we'll further explain a little bit more about that. Naturalization, special immigration juvenile status, sometimes mentioned as STIGs, U visas, VAWAs. VAWAs usually tend to do with domestic violence, and other more services. We'll go on to the next slide. So important information to note is that this presentation is not intended to be legal advice. So everyone's immigration situation is different. And for that, we always recommend everyone to set up an appointment with CARECEN to come and see us. So if you have any questions about your personal case, we encourage you to schedule an appointment so that you can discuss your specific situation in a confidential space with us. I'll move on. And we will do a quick poll, and I'll pass it back to Jessica.
All right, so let's see if this works. This is just to kind of gauge what folks sort of information is with this. Just want to make sure the chat. Okay, well, hello everyone. All right, so let's see. I'm going to launch. Okay, so the question is, I'm undocumented. Can I travel on a domestic flight within the US? So folks can take a few seconds to either answer yes, answer no, or answer maybe. And no wrong answers here. I promise that so that way we'll actually go over this and get through it. So totally okay to guess if folks aren't sure. All right, so yes, maybe, and we've got no no's. All right, so let's get into that. If you're undocumented, can you travel on a domestic flight? So let me just close that up. Okay, so it's a little bit complicated. I would say the answer is sometimes you can, and sometimes we would recommend that you don't. So, so let's go over that, what we mean by that. So when you travel domestically by air, okay, if you're going to travel through an airport and go on an airplane, travelers flying on domestic flights must present a valid photo ID. So we do not recommend undocumented people who do not have status such as DACA or temporary protective status to fly due to the increased risk of questioning by immigration officers. So if you have DACA status or you have TPS, then you have valid work permits, you have deferred action, and you can fly a domestic flight within the US with no issue. But if you do not have status, then we don't recommend it just because there'll be increased questioning. You can use, and we know undocumented people do fly through, through airplanes as well domestically by using their foreign passport, or in California, because of AB 60, you have a driver's license. And so you are able to use that to, those are valid ID documents to fly on domestic travel. But TSA can question you, and TSA can refer you to ICE. So they see that you have a foreign passport from El Salvador, and they might start asking you questions. Were you born here? Why don't you have another ID? Things like that. And so if you are questioned by TSA, we recommend you do not have to answer any of their questions about your citizenship status or where you were born. However, please know that it may lead to prolonged questioning or detainment. And so we're going to go over why right now the foreign passport and your AB 60 driver's license you're able to use up until May 3rd of 2023. So as I mentioned, right now, right, until May 3rd of 2023, when the real ID will be required, undocumented people can board a domestic flight by using their either permanent resident card, a foreign passport, or their California driver's license. Normally what you use to travel is a US passport, US passport card or ID, your straight driver's license, or this long list here. Just stop and see if there's any questions. Okay, yeah. So until May 3rd of 2023, you can still use a foreign passport or driver's license to board a flight. However, on May 3rd of 2023, the Real ID will go into effect in California unless it gets extended. So the Real ID is a federal Real ID Act that was created that now, in order to board a flight within the US or to enter a secure federal facility, such as a military base or a federal courthouse, you are now going to be required to use a Real ID. And in order to get a Real ID, you have to meet certain requirements. So let's talk about that. Back. Okay, this is just that the deadline's been extended to May 3rd, 2023, given the pandemic. Okay, so what does it mean? If you, here on the left-hand side, this is what a real ID looks like, or what it will look like. Some already have it, and it's got this bear in the top right corner with a star, and that identifies that this is a real ID, and this ID is compliant. So you have to have a valid US passport, a valid social security number in order to obtain the California Real ID. So if you don't have a valid social security, a valid work permit that you're here in the US, or any ID that shows your citizenship status, you will be given a California driver's license, but it will be a federal non-compliant card. And you can tell by the right-hand corner will say federal limits apply. So after May 3rd of 2023, you will not be able to use this driver's license to board a flight. Okay, so this is why up until now, we do have a lot of undocumented people boarding domestic flights, like I said, using their California driver's license that is not the real ID, or using a foreign passport, although they do run the risk that they can get questioned. That does not apply to those who are DACA holders, though. And so I think that's important to note, because if you are a DACA holder or you do have temporary protective status, you will be given a real ID as long as you can show that you have an unexpired work permit. So it's very important that you stay in status with your DACA status, or your temporary protective status. So you can take that. So you can show one identity document, which will include either your valid unexpired work permit, or if you're already a permanent resident, you would take that. Or if you have documentation of temporary protective status, you can take all of that along with a document that shows that you have a valid social security number. And then you have to provide 2 documents that you are a California resident. So you can show your SMC transcripts, for example. You can show bills, a phone bill, medical, insurance, your tax returns, anything that will show that you are a resident. Okay, again, this law is after May 3rd, 2023, that it will be required that you have the real ID in order to board a domestic flight. So in essence, just to kind of remind people, if you don't have status, you are running the risk of being questioned by TSA and getting referred to immigration. So how do you prepare for your domestic flight? If you choose to say, you know, I know that I'm undocumented, but I have my foreign passport, or I have a California driver's license, and I do not have DACA, and I'm still going to go on this trip because I have to go see my family who's in Chicago, for example. So then we just say, make sure that you prepare for it. Make sure when you book your flight that the name on your ticket is the exact match with the ID you're using, so that you don't get questioned, why does the name on the ticket a different last name as your ID? Because again, we don't want it to lead to any additional questioning. We also advise you that you secure your devices. So the government is allowed to ask you for your phone and you know, to give up your phone, but you don't have to provide your password. So it's important to keep your information secure with a number or a word, as opposed to your fingerprint, where they can say, please go ahead and open your phone. So go ahead and secure your devices so that if the government does take away your phone, they can't access the information. It's also important to develop a safety plan. So if in case you do get stopped or you get questioned, that you designate at least 2 people that have access to your important documents and all your flight information, so that if something happens, those would be the people that you immediately would contact, such as an attorney, a community organization, or family and friends, so that if something goes wrong, they know that you will be calling them. So you have all your documents prepared. So that's one of the ways that we ask, again, for people who do not have DACA status or temporary protective status, and will be going on a domestic flight, you want to make sure that you prepare yourself additionally. If you do have deferred action, such as DACA or temporary protective status, then make sure that you take your valid work permit with you, and make sure that you have copies on you and that you leave copies behind as well. Okay, so that was traveling by air. Now let's say you're traveling by bus or by train. So lots of us, we might take the Greyhound to go to like Arizona or a different state or even within California. So during the Trump administration, CBP, which is Customs and Border Patrol, did conduct searches on Amtraks and Greyhounds. And again, for Greyhound and Amtrak, you do need an ID. So if you were questioned by Customs and Border agents, then you had to provide an ID, and often that would show that you either had a foreign passport or you maybe had a California driver's license that wasn't the real ID, which can lead to questioning by immigration. On local buses, if you're going to take local buses, you don't need an ID. But on Amtrak and Greyhound, we did see during the Trump administration, Customs and Border stopping Greyhound and doing these searches. And again, if you are ever searched by immigration, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to refuse a search, but do not lie and do not present any false documents or foreign documents. Basically, you don't have to essentially provide any information. You have the right to remain silent. We have not seen this during the Biden administration conducting searches, but in order to be take caution, we ask again, have a plan. If you're going to take these means of transportation, that you have a plan, people know where you're going, they know your information, and that you're right, that you can remain silent if you are questioned. And again, if you have DACA status or TPS, supporting you carry your work permit with you at all times. So let's say you're traveling by car and you're going to take a trip, 2 hours away, maybe to San Diego, going south. So again, we just say traveling by car, be careful, follow the laws, and do your homework. So make sure that the driver has a driver's license, it's not expired, that you familiarize yourself with local police policies. So in California, the police does not cooperate with immigration, but in states like Arizona, they do. So let's say you're going to go to Arizona, then it's important that you know that if you get pulled over, they might cooperate with ICE. So it's important you familiarize yourself with, again, Customs and Border Patrol checkpoints. So there is a checkpoint. When you go from California to Arizona, there's no checkpoint, but returning from Arizona to California, there is. And so those are, putting yourself at risk if you are undocumented with no status. So you do not have DACA or any other status, then you are passing through a checkpoint. You can get questioned. And so again, it's good to know where the checkpoints are so you can avoid those checkpoints. If you yourself are the driver, you're undocumented, but you have a valid driver's license, and you would be pulled over, you're right. You do have to show a driver's license. You do have to show proof of insurance because that's in the state of California. But then after that, you have the right to remain silent, and you do not have to answer any questions about your immigration status or sign any paperwork. So we're seeing a trend here that in the end, right, we have the right to always remain silent if we are questioned. And here's just a map so people can see that Customs, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, does have authority to operate within 100 miles of the US border. So when you look at that, you're looking at a lot of cities. It says nearly 2 out of 3 people live within the 100-mile border zone. So like LA is within this 100-mile border that they do have the authority. Good, it's a good thing though, LA is a sanctuary city, and so we don't have that. We don't see immigration as active, doing searches or raids very often in the city. All right, and then one more thing about traveling within the US. So what if I want to travel to one of the US territories? So for example, Puerto Rico, or the British Virgin Islands. They are part of the US because they're territories. So technically, however, they are treated as foreign territories. So if you have DACA, right, or TPS, you can travel to Puerto Rico, right, or any of these US territories, but you should apply for advanced parole, because even though technically they're within the US, you are putting yourself at risk, and we want to make sure that there would be nothing wrong. So you should apply for advanced parole if you want to go to a US territory. Those who do not have status and are undocumented, if you go to one of these, so you leave and go to one of these territories, that could result in a referral to ICE for removal, even though they're US territories. So you want to treat them as foreign territories. All right, so now I'm going to pass it on to Irene to go over traveling outside the US.
Thank you, Jessica. So as Jessica mentioned, now we're going to talk about traveling outside the United States. So for those of you that might be traveling outside the United States, you first need to know if you're eligible before you leave. So when we ask who can re-enter the United States, well, we're looking at citizens, we're looking at LPR holders, also known as green card holders. But with LPRs, we also want to be careful that before you leave, you make sure you consult actually with an attorney, because there's certain rules stating how long you can actually be outside so that you're not jeopardizing your LPR status. Another note will be as I had mentioned, the time restriction. Another group is those certain visa holders. Visa holders are also some people that can re-enter the United States. For those of you who are DACA or TPS recipients, definitely if they were granted advance parole, you definitely can leave the United States and re-enter. But definitely always make sure that you have been granted at least advance parole to be able to leave if you are a DACA holder. Let me go to the next slide. Okay. So for traveling outside the United States, this is in regards to COVID-19. So because of COVID-19, we have seen a new implementations of rules. So number one being that effective January 16, people have to take a test 3 days prior to flying into the United States, and it needs to present a negative COVID-19 test. In the event that you have gotten sick, in this case, now you need a proof of recovery, and this proof of recovery needs to be at least within 90 days. These two requirements are applied to anyone 2 years and older. So definitely always keep those numbers as well in mind in case that you're traveling with minor children. In addition to that, just know that if you do not present either or, proof that you have not shown a negative test within the past 3 days, or a recovery within the 90 days, airlines can prevent you from actually boarding your airplane and coming back into the United States. So keep that in mind if you're traveling outside. I'll go on to the next slide. So what is advance parole? The best way that I can explain advance parole is pretty much as a permit that allows you to re-enter the United States. But for this permit, in order to acquire it, you must apply for it. So individuals with certain immigration statuses such as DACA or TPS, or who or are within pending immigration application, can sometimes request permission in advance to be able to leave the United States for a short period of time for a specific purpose, of course, and then be paroled back into the country. So a note that you will see in the bottom is that DACA recipients must request and receive advance parole approval before traveling outside the United States. If you leave the United States without advance parole, your DACA will be terminated. And good thing for you guys, we also help with advance parole, and we have fee waivers, so definitely come and see us. I'll take the next slide. So in regards to DACA, so if you are a DACA recipient and you're trying to apply for advance parole, These are a few of the items that you need to show in order for your travel to be granted. So number one, you must show either one of three: a humanitarian, which includes travel to obtain medical treatment, or see a family member that is ill. For educational purpose, in this case, we've seen such as a semester abroad program, or maybe something shorter, like if there's a seminar that you want to take in the summer that will allow you to advance your education, or gain a wider perspective of your education, and you receive an approval letter, you can always submit that. Or for employment, such as overseas assignments, or conference or training, once more, that are related to your employment. So once more, in order to apply for advanced parole, you need to have one of these three categories present: either humanitarian, educational, or employment. For TPS, those who are TPS holders, you may travel abroad with prior consent and current status. So there's no need to link travel to a specific purpose. You're able to travel. But with TPS holders, once more, you want to be careful that you have not spent over 6 months outside of the United States within one period, or that you have not done so many frequent trips. So always consult with an attorney. I'll go to the next slide. Sorry, Jessica, do you mind if I get them? Oh, there you go. So how to prepare for your advanced parole application. So current DACA work permit, there's several things that you will need to collect prior to completing your application. So that's making sure that you have your current DACA work permit, also known as an EAD, a valid passport, because you'll be traveling outside of the United States. In addition to that, you also want to present proposed dates that you plan to travel. At the moment, advanced paroles are currently taking 6 months. So you might want to project 6 months out of when you want to travel. In addition to that, you will need proof of need to travel. So for example, for humanitarian advanced parole, a medical record of an elderly family member just stating their current illnesses will suffice. In regards to an example of education, an acceptance letter for a study abroad program, once more, will be more than enough. An example for evidence for employment and for advanced parole would be a letter from an employer. In addition, as I wanted to remind you guys earlier, we do have filing fee assistance available that will help you cover the $575. So definitely take advantage of it. I'll go on to the next one. So why travel on advanced parole? So there are fee waivers available, and that's always the main reason why to apply. Like, you don't have to pay out of pocket. So that's always a plus. But in regards to legal importance, is for those who are DACA recipients, coming back into the United States with advanced parole gives you a lawful entry into the country. And in the future, if you ever decide to, or if you ever get the opportunity to adjust your status, having a lawful entry to the United States will make future immigration cases for you a bit simpler, to put it in that aspect. For personal benefit, traveling always outside of the country of the United States does allow us to broaden our horizons a little bit more, but also to get to have new experiences. So definitely, it's something to take advantage of. And in regards to equity, many DACA holders are unable to access traditional study abroad programs. So having programs like advanced parole that allow you to travel, it's a way of being able to kind of meet that need. So definitely take advantage.
Did you just? I'm doing it. Did you just answer? Sorry. Did you just answer the question that I posted on the chat? I could barely hear you with the kids.
No, I think the question in the chat, I'll get to it right after this. Well,
Okay.
it's a little bit complicated. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so much for posting questions. So we'll go on to the next thing in regards to emergency travel. So advanced parole does allow you to do actually emergency travel, and emergency travels is, for example, for humanitarian reasons. If you have an elderly family member who is extremely ill, and you're trying to get to them as soon as possible, there is a process that you can go through. Once more, it's named emergency travel. You will go through the common advanced parole application, but once you get an approval, you will go to your local office to try and see if they can expedite this path for you. So once more, we do help, we do assist with the application and walking you through step by step on what is it that you're going to do in regards to requesting emergency travel, although they're not guaranteed. So that's something very important to take in mind. I'll go on to the next. So risk in advanced parole. So advanced parole is discretionary. So USCIS might deny your application or keep your money. That's one of the downsides. With COVID-19 pandemic, there are other limitations and risk involved with traveling, such as proof of vaccination and negative tests. So these are things that you have to plan well in advance. Once you are outside of the United States, so you're making sure that you can find a place where you can get tested and get your results. And if you get sick, you also have like a plan in action. So those are some of the risks. In addition, you cannot travel until your application is approved and you have a travel document issued by USCIS. So once more, right now, the applications are taking roughly around 6 months, which is a wait. And then re-entry is discretionary. So get screened by an immigration attorney so that you're not exposing yourself to any risk. If you do decide to apply for advanced parole, but in the time that we have been processing advanced parole applications, we have not encountered any cases where a person is denied re-entry into the United States under any basis. Just Jessica, do you mind stepping on this one?
Yeah.
You have not seen the denied.
If there's no criminal background or prior removal orders, then you're not considered high risk to travel as long as you have, current DACA. We haven't seen the denials that we've seen of reentry have been because of criminal background or open removal order that they haven't taken care of.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna also just step in on the question we had in chat because it relates to advanced parole. So while we're on the subject, the question was, is it possible for someone who has a work permit from ICE to ask permission to travel outside the country? So I'm not sure if what you mean is having a work permit from ICE, if you're talking about possibly asylum. And so one thing I'll just give you general advice in terms of folks who have asylum applications pending can technically apply for advanced parole, but they should not apply to go back to the country. Because then it looks like their asylum application isn't as valid. So I would suggest that you book an appointment with us so we could screen you to look at what your risk would be and possibilities to apply for advanced parole for something else. It's like if you want to go to travel to another country, then we can look at what your own situation would be. And that way we don't talk about it here. Given that there's some confidentiality with your case and all of that, it'll be case specific, and let's go over the facts on a one-on-one. But technically, folks who have asylum applications can apply for advanced parole, but it's not advisable that you do that if there are issues that might make you inadmissible. As Irene says, and I have it on here, re-entry is always discretionary, so they're going to look at some issues that might cause a problem or lead to additional questioning. So we'd have to look at your case specifically and all of your facts to give you that advice.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you.
So our next slide is get screened. So always seek an attorney to conduct a full screening to see if advanced parole is right for you. And during the screening, we will discuss any possible grounds of inadmissibility, such as the criminal history, unpaid tickets, warrants, misdemeanors, possible felonies. Even if you have DACA and had a misdemeanor, advanced parole may not be safe for you. So once more, definitely come in and get screened. Prior immigration history is also something to take into consideration. So if there's multiple entries into the United States, have you ever been ordered, removed, detained, gone to immigration court will be some of the questions that we will ask, or helped anyone enter the United States without permission, use false or fake documents to enter the United States. These are like type of questions that we'll be asking, trying to understand more a little bit your case to see if advanced parole once more, it's right for you. I'll go on to the next slide. So how to make an appointment, the golden ticket here. So currently community college students, faculty, and staff can schedule an appointment through Simply Book Me. So both Jessica and I will be able to assist you guys. Feel free to schedule your appointments on whichever date and time is more convenient for you. If your specific college is not listed, you're always more than welcome to choose other community college. Do not use CSU campus. And lastly, we will open it up for questions. So feel free either to unmute yourselves or add your questions to the chat, and we will try to answer them.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I know we threw a lot of information out there. And so hopefully if there's any clarifications on traveling within the US or traveling outside. As you're thinking about your questions then, I'm going to just do some review questions, see if folks were paying attention, get some of your responses to see if folks remember. So on which date does the Real ID go into effect? You can go put it on the chat. You can unmute yourself just so see if we remember. When does the Real ID go into effect? The October date or March 2023? I think Victoria is right. No, so sorry for the caps. Yeah, so on May 3rd, 2023. Is that correct, Irene?
I'm here looking at my slides. The font is so small, but I believe Victoria must be right. Let me confirm.
So it is on May of 2023. And again, the Real ID is going to push people that we are limited to travel to travel into federal facilities. We're going to need a Real ID. So no longer will we be able to go via airfare without a Real ID. That will mean that undocumented folks who do not have the Real ID will have to travel by bus or car, train, other means of transportation. So
this is stressful, really stressful.
I know.
I hope they come up with something with it. I mean, like, I hope they can postpone it again, like they keep postponing, like sending over and over after. But with a work permit, I have a work permit. If I do, because I know I can do a Real ID right now, but I'm trying to get my driver license. So I only have the ID, which is valid for 5 years. Once I pass my driving test, I know I can also apply for Real ID, but I want to get my driver license once. Is it still going to be for 5 years, or it's just going to be valid based on my work permit?
It's going to be valid based on your work permit. So they'll issue you a driver's license. Is it 4 years? I don't even remember what how long.
It's usually 5 years because my ID
5
right
years?
now is
Okay.
5 years.
Okay. I thought the driver's license 4 years, excuse me, on the DMV, but whatever long it is, if your valid work permit, like let's say DACA, expires every 2 years, you're going to get a reminder after 2 years that says, hey, you have to show that you're valid for the other 2 or the other 3 that are remaining. So your work permit does have to remain valid for that time. Otherwise it would get terminated. So the key thing there is that definitely stay within status of your work permit so that you always have it's always valid and not expired. And you also do bring up a good point. It has gotten extended twice already. And so it's good for it might be legislation that ends up getting extended again, or ends up not getting passed because people think it's going to be a very difficult. So we'll go ahead and stop the recording here. Thanks for reminding